Cheers. After years of frustration working with national security agencies in the developing world with very rigid and inflexible information systems, we decided in 2016 to create our own company to try to provide them with a holistic and real-time view into their operating context so they can take better decisions on a day-to-day basis, improve or increase positive impact, and reduce unnecessary risk. 3 years later, today in 2019, our technology is used to combat piracy in Somalia. It's used to combat and fight online extremism and terrorism across the Middle East, and to protect critical national infrastructure against guerrilla attacks in places like Colombia. Our clients are public and private sector organizations operating in what the Fragile States Index would qualify as elevated warning to high alert areas. Places with significant economic, political, and social cohesion challenges, but that come with great opportunities. If we look at these countries in the categories I've mentioned, we find that about 2 out of every $10 in the global economy by GDP belongs to this category, and it also encompasses almost 60% of the world's population. So it's not insignificant. And furthermore, it's growing 5% annual. But to capture this potential, we're faced with a lot of issues and challenges still. Whether it's terrorism, extremism, disinformation, poverty, natural disasters, there's still so many challenges left for us to address to really be able to capture this potential. So at AKTEK, we're really, really proud to work with local actors, the ones that are really on the front lines of so many of these issues around the world. While foreign assistance usually works in 12-month cycles, they go on to one crisis until the next one happens and then they move on. Local actors are there to stay. They're not going anywhere. We think they're best positioned to really address some of these challenges at their roots. One such organizations we've had the privilege to work with over the past few years has been the Somaliland Coast Guard, at the forefront of the fight against piracy in the Gulf of Aden. Their people are a true inspiration to my team and I. They're there because they want to serve their country, they want to protect their people, even if it means they have to work side jobs to make ends meet. 200 kilometers west of them in neighboring Djibouti, there's a foreign army base there to keep the region stable. They have all sorts of cool toys and expensive tools, hard to use and complex, completely out of reach to our friends in the Coast Guard. But what sort of help did they receive in the past? Well, that's where you turn to foreign aid. For many years, foreign aid has been mostly about foreign organizations flying in to put a very expensive band-aid on a complex problem, and there's so many issues with that. Because you're fundamentally using public tax money when you're investing in that area, you want to do a little bit of due diligence before you start investing. So what you do is you hire maybe a fancy professor or a contextual expert from a place like Oxford, ship him or her to a place like Somalia, try to figure out what the problem is and understand the conflict actors and the dynamics, and then have him or her spend maybe a few weeks in country talking to high-level government officials, and then come back, sit in an English garden somewhere to write a dreadfully long report that would get outdated the moment it's delivered onto the decision maker. Right? So you do that analysis in January, and then it's published in March, and then you take a decision in September. Between January and September, a lot of things will have changed. Yeah. So as a result, assistance is then delivered based on static, preconceived ideas, a foreign point of view, and very little field data to actually back the different investments and different actions. Aid recipients are passive recipients, they're handshakes, there's a photo op, and little change really happens. Or if it does at last, it doesn't last very long. For 4 years, that was the backdrop to my day-to-day and my frustration. I worked with security agencies and defense agencies across the Middle East and Africa implementing stabilization projects. Don't get me wrong, like, it was really, really interesting, fascinating work, exciting. I got to sleep in the back of Lebanese army trucks patrolling the Syrian border. I had to fight mosquitoes in the Kenyan countryside just to get 3G signal and work. I had to defend myself in front of high-level government officials in places like Tunisia to reassure them that I was not a British spy. It was funny the first time, frankly, I laughed. The second time, it was no longer funny. But then, funding would dry out, the projects would move on. We'd deliver something, but the solution would very quickly no longer match the context it was designed for, and it would start collecting dust somewhere in a hangar. And that was quite depressing. So in 2014, I met who would become our chief technology officer at AKTEK, George Assad, also a Lebanese citizen, while working for a border patrol unit in Lebanon. We were tasked to help. It's quite windy in here, isn't it? We were tasked to help the National Border Security Agency to beef up their capabilities in the fight against Islamic State, which is a very fascinating assignment, but also quite complex. So what this meant for us was to build an information management system for them to keep track of their operations and their readiness to face evolving threats. So we would sit down with the client, figure out what their information needs were, draw out the complete schema over 3 days in workshops, and then lock ourselves in a room somewhere with software engineers over 2 months in a place like Beirut, and then come back out to the client and say, hey, look what we've built. And they'd say, this is great, exactly what we asked for, except there's only one little tiny problem. Everything's changed, right? So now we have new types of operations we're doing that we previously weren't doing, because now we have new drones. We want to track their flight paths and what they're doing, what they're seeing. There's a new terrorist group that has sprung up that's different from the former ones, that has a different modus operandi that we need to keep track of. How does your software allow me to keep track of these things? And we'd say, crap, I wish you had told me 2 months before when we were writing the source code, because now we have to go back to it and edit things, and that's expensive and time consuming. So we'd do just that. And then when we would come out, well, you know, you guessed it, the same thing would keep happening. So that was a very frustrating thing for us to deal with, and at some point we just got sick of it, and we thought, you know what, I think there's white space for a new product. So here comes, you know, Fusion, our product. So from that experience, we realized the need for customizable tools that could be deployed really, really quickly at the snap of a finger without coding whatsoever. If we can ensure that the tools are adaptable as our clients' needs evolve, we can probably remove ourselves from the equation as the middleman, as the interface between their evolving needs and the solution, thereby reducing the cost quite a bit and increasing the reach or the access to such technologies in places that frankly really need it, and that historically were forgotten from, you know, the main suppliers of blue chip IT solutions in the defense space. So in 2016, we began implementing this with our friends in the Coast Guard in Somalia. Neighboring, you know, foreign bases had their really complex, heavy tools at $25,000 per seat, with even more expensive IT engineers that would be embedded within the client side at $300,000 per seat per head per year. Sorry, this was just unsustainable for them. But they had something better. They had their own tool. They had built themselves. They'd given it their own name. They called it ASAS, which means foundation in Somali, so something to build on. And they completely designed the schema on their own, and they're able to change that on a moment's notice without ever having to go through us or any IT engineers. So they've been using different versions of this system as it's evolved since 2016 to keep track of their operations and share information better across departments. Whilst before, information was the way information was collected was a bit disorganized, scattered across all sorts of static reports with little traceability. It was hard to determine, you know, how much of it was completed, whether the data was correct or it had been filled wrong or something. With Fusion, they know exactly what data they have, what information they have at a specific point in time, who has access to what gaps they have within their knowledge space, and how to fill that really, really quickly through the software. So with what we learned from our friends in Somalia, we continue to invest in our tool and our technology, and we also had the privilege to sign new clients, not just government agencies or foundations, but also businesses. In the extractive, so oil, gas, mining world, but also the infrastructure sector, with some of the largest companies in the developing world, some of them Fortune 500, so it's been a tremendous learning experience for us to be able to scale some of what we've learned from the public sector in defense to the private sector, also in corporate security management. But at the end of the day, we never lose focus from our core mission, which is to really help those on the front lines of, you know, the world's most complicated security issues that are working so hard to keep our communities safe. We've started working with a counter-terrorism unit this year in Africa, and with Fusion, they're able to keep track of their organizational memory, make sure that it's not lost with rotations and staffing, get a shared reading of how their context is evolving so they can better prepare for not just now, but also the future. They're using Fusion to keep track of arrest and observe recruitment into terrorist organization across their territory. It's helping them measure their performance as a unit, and ensure that they can iterate their approach and measure the impact of different operation or options that they have to continuously iterate and improve and really deliver on their mandate to their people. Just 2 months ago, we also sent some people to Ukraine to deploy the same technology to help monitor a ceasefire agreement in the east. Also a very fascinating, very contracted, complex problem. There, Fusion will be used to facilitate key processes such as requests for information from different stakeholders that are kind of monitoring the situation, ensuring that that's not lost, that it's centralized, it's secure, and it's easy to access and analyze. That's not all. About a year ago, we also started working with natural language processing and machine learning to help our clients track sentiment towards extremist and counter-extremist messaging in places like Iraq, so helping national government agencies fight extremist content online and not just win back territory as they have, but also ensure that they secure hearts and minds in the post-conflict environment. We've also been working over the last 2 years or so monitoring Islamic State propaganda on YouTube and how it's evolved in both volume and sentiment in terms of response to really help the global coalition forces adjust their programming and their communications campaign to fight it better. So really, really fascinating work. Lastly, just another case study. We developed a hate speech detector using artificial intelligence in Bosnia-Herzegovina to keep track of the social cohesion problem, just its scale and its quality of what kind across the online space, to inform national government entities of what's happening where and what they should worry about based on the trends that they are observed. So, clearly we're just getting started, and frankly there's so much to be done, but we remain hopeful. For us, the dream is to provide every organization operating in such fragile, complex, conflict-affected states with powerful information fusion tools that enable them to gain a holistic and real-time view into their operating context. But it's really important for us to do this in a way that's scalable and cost-efficient so that it can reach the places where it's most needed. Frankly, that's what we've learned over the last 6 years working with defense agencies around the world, and that's what we're looking to scale now in terms of our impact working with more partners. So if you're interested in working with us at AKTEK, please come and find me after this and we can chat. For some time now, the world has come to realize that the people closest to the issues are best positioned to address them at their roots, whether it's terrorism, extremism, violent conflict, natural disasters, global health, poverty. There's so much to be done. But people who are fighting on these issues can't do it blindly. They need timely, context-sensitive information to take the right decision every time. And we think with the advent of big data technology and machine learning, we can really help empower people on the front lines. So the challenges we face are complex, there's no doubt about it. It does feel a little like every day is more uncertain, but everywhere around us we see people working really, really hard to make a difference, like positive difference, whether that's in the public sector world or the private sector world. And frankly, no matter the odds, they don't seem to give up, so neither can we. And that's the fight we want to fight. Thank you very much.